With the hype already building for Yooka-Laylee, I'm trying to remain cool, calm and collected about the whole development. I'm always cautious about hyping up a game to a point where it can't meet my ridiculous expectations. We expect life-changing game mechanics and graphics that'll transport us to another world like a virtual reality flotation tank, but I always think we need to take a step back and remember these are video games. A visual medium that isn't even that old. But I can understand the excitement for Yooka-Laylee. Hell, I'm part of that generation that absolutely adores Banjo Kazooie, almost nostalgia blinded. But I'm already blind. As the generation that played Banjo Kazooie has grown up without any real contender or advancements in the 3D World Collectathon, this childlike wonder is what many of us want to return to. It was the first time, at least to me, where platformers weren't literally a platformer. Everything was contextual to the world. Mario 64 almost reminded you that it was a platformer. But the levels in Banjo didn't feel like it was made by a game designer putting platforms and jumps in specific places. It felt like a living, breathing world that we could just jump around in and explore. That joy, that wonder we had when we were young is perhaps why we want Yooka-Laylee so bad. Or perhaps we want to see this forgotten gem of a genre revamped for the modern day. Because Banjo Kazooie was an IP that unfortunately fell from stardom so quickly, it's like a Greek tragedy. So we had the first game, Banjo Kazooie, and that was awesome of course, and then we had the GBA game and that existed, and then we had the less talked about sequel, Banjo Tooie. Banjo Tooie is the sequel overshadowed by the original. But why? I mean, looking at it at first glance, and hell, even while playing it, it does improve on a lot of things the first game did in terms of gameplay. More moves, bigger world, an original story as opposed to a rehash, clever writing, more characters, even bigger challenges, completely new concepts, and updated graphics. Think of the sequel as a checklist. Video games are a funny medium. In respect to the medium of film, the first of a movie series is almost always seen as the best one. Now of course, there are always going to be exceptions, so don't be one of those, but Toy Story 2, The popular opinion is that the second, third, fourth or fifth movie in any movie series are shameless cash-ins, the first one being the best. However, in the terms of video games, the original is seen as the roughest. Rarely is it considered the best, and for good reason, because the sequel usually expands and improves upon the original formula. We expect the same gameplay, but they do it better, so it's usually the second or even third in a series that is considered the best. And yet, almost everyone who has played BK and BT will say they prefer the original. What did this near-perfect sequel get wrong to not receive the high respect other sequels have achieved? As stated before, video game sequels usually follow a checklist that make it a better game, but this checklist could perhaps be the curse of this sequel. The one improvement all sequels do nowadays, and perhaps the most universally loved, is making the game bigger. Everything is more expansive, wider, and all around a larger scale. And Banjo Tooie is of course no exception. And at first glance, that means better, right? This is perhaps Banjo Tooie's biggest flaw. The worlds feel empty. The worlds were made bigger, yes, but the collectibles were not expanded upon to fill them up. In fact, one could argue they're limited. Notes, eggs, and feathers are all now collected in baskets, giving you multiple instead of the singular style. This could be seen as an improvement because some players dislike collecting notes one by one. Those players are dumb. Notes seem to have a lesser importance, a lesser impact because they were grouped in 5s and 10s, meaning there could only be a maximum of 17 of these things in each level. There was less satisfaction of following a path of music notes with that lovely Speaking of rewarding, jiggies. Like the first game, there are 10 jiggies in each world, but again, the worlds are a little bit too big to accommodate for them. The levels are so expansive that sometimes it felt like you had to do an hour and a half of playtime just to get one jiggy, and instead of that funny animation, you get thrilling. Now these are most of the design flaws I've had with Banjo Tooie. However, much like Banjo Nuts and there was one improvement Banjo Tooie took and based it around, which was ultimately its downfall. Saving the note progress in each level. Not being able to save was bullshit, and we all knew that, even with that stupid reason. Yeah, sure, Bottles. Goggled-eyed prick. I'm sorry, that wasn't necessary. Ultimately, this was implemented in the XBLA version, and thank god. However, Banjo Tooie did this on the N64, and because you could now save the note count, you could leave the world freely and not worry about 100% completing a level as you enter. However, with this newfangled doohickey, Rare decided to implement the idea of intertwining levels. On paper, that sounds amazing. Being able to do missions in one world to affect another, that's too awesome. But it wasn't implemented too well. Remember Click Clock Woods where all the 4 seasons were integrated and it took a long time to 100% it? Imagine 10 of them. The missions that require these cross-level integration can get incredibly confusing at times. Some are simple, like blowing up a wall to another world. However, some required finding a button in some weird place that can only be accessed after using Mumbo and then finding the train in another level to transport it to this train station and... What? I'm not saying Banjo Kazooie has to be super easy, but the challenge should come from hard platforming, a difficult boss, or puzzles. Not some confusing, time-wasting maze through levels that are so big, it's a trek to get to one point to another. I wouldn't have a problem with this if the worlds themselves weren't so big and sprawling. As the worlds are not as memorable, hell, I can barely remember their names, getting lost is definitely not a plus. Especially with Grunty's Industries. Fuck that level. Rusty Bucket Bay got nothing on Grunty's Industries. I've noticed playing through Banjo Tooie, I didn't feel as joyful, less whimsy seemed to encompass me as I explored the hub world and the different levels. Maybe it just didn't live up to my ridiculous expectations. However, I came to one conclusion. This game is darker. Now I don't mean like heavy rain dark where smiling seems to be a dying resource, but enough so the innocence is lost. Think of Banjo Kazooie being pure white and Tooie being slightly grey. It can be perfectly summarized in the opening cutscene. Bottles dies. Now, that seems unnecessarily dark. Not because Bottles died per se, but it's the way it's treated. It's so nonchalant about it, which I understand. They don't want to take it too seriously, but it comes off as really mean-spirited. It's a downer right from the get-go. Also, this opening has revealed death is now real in the Banjo Kazooie universe. In the first game, death was never really implied. Grunty wanted to steal Tootie's good looks, and that was her goal. Death was never mentioned. Well, apart from the... But Grunty's goal in Tooie is to suck the life out of everyone. In essence, to kill. Again, it's treated lightly with plenty of humor, but it did rub me the wrong way. Not only did the story and tone become darker, but also the color palette. The hub world and levels seem to have a strange shadow on almost everything, and it didn't feel as childish and just blander. Perhaps it was Rare's attempt at growing up with their audience, but it doesn't mean levels can't be as colorful. Also, why change Banjo's voice?
Now don't get me wrong, I still love playing Banjo Tooie every now and again, and there are so many improvements this game did right as well.
The updated graphics, a new variety in eggs, heaps of minigames including a GoldenEye knockoff, a new story that isn't a rehash, expanding the move list instead of relearning, saving music notes, the jokes are still funny, an amazing final boss, and a good increase in difficulty when it's not confusing. Whew. There's plenty to love in this less talked about sequel. However, there are just too many cons to ignore. Banjo Kazooie has always been a style over substance platformer. I don't mean this in a bad way, because the substance was all there, but it was the atmosphere, the humor and the characters that made it so memorable and have a big place in people's hearts. Banjo Tooie tried to up the style at the cost of the substance. In a 3D world platforming adventure where the adventuring is not fun, it's going to fall. It wasn't that too much was changed from the first game, but instead, the wrong elements were changed. Now, what does this have to do with Yooka-Laylee? Well, a lot really. The power consoles can generate is staggering. Graphics have gone from this to this. The power is seemingly limitless. Worlds can be so huge now, it's so easy to go overboard, much like this script. But if it comes at a cost of making empty worlds, much like Nuts and Bolts, then it'll ultimately fail. I'm not expecting anyone from Playtonic to actually watch this video of a nerd explaining the shortcomings of a video game that's over 10 years old. But if we can learn anything from Banjo Tooie, is that we don't want a 3D platforming collectathon to be huge and expansive. We want it to be a huge and expansive 3D platforming collectathon. I'm sure the developers know this and will take their time to make a fantastic end product. After all, they don't want to let down their backers. At the end of the day, Yooka-Laylee, I hope, doesn't fall to the shortcomings Banjo Tooie did. I hope it retains the feel of Banjo Kazooie while taking it to new heights, both figuratively and literally. From what I've seen, it looks amazing, with plenty of laughter and hopefully fleshed out levels with plenty of things to do, enemies to bash, and C buttons to collect. Because as many girls have said to me, bigger does not mean better, it's how you use it. Hello everybody, and thanks so much for watching. This video was a weird one. I wasn't sure whether to classify it as like a retrospective or a review of any kind, or just, you know, whatever. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I really didn't want to make this just a video about me bitching about a video game, and if it did get on your nerves, then I completely understand that. Or you can comment down below and tell me your opinion on Banjo Tooie or Yooka-Laylee, or just say how stupid I am. It's all good. Anyway, there's a few videos up here for you to watch, and hopefully I'll see you guys later. Is the plug over? Yeah, plug's over. Alright, see you folks, have a good one.